Good morning and a very warm welcome to our Remembrance Live Assembly. I'm Zeb Soanes.
And I'm Sonali Shah. This jam-packed event is being brought to you by the Royal British Legion and the National Literacy Trust, who've pulled us all together to remember. We are coming to you live from London today. As you can see, we are delighted to be joined by some of you in the studio. Hello, Thomas Towers School. Welcome, welcome.
And we're also pleased we've got one of the UK's most famous artists here with us, Cornelia Parker. Where are you, Cornelia?
I'm here.
We'll be chatting to Cornelia a little later about something very special that the students are creating here in the studio today.
We're also excited to welcome children's author Izzy Lawrence, who is also a historian, which means she knows a lot about history, and Major Naveed Mohammed from the British Army. Hello to you both, and they are going to be answering some of your brilliant questions later. And I know many of you have already sent some in. The great news is it's not too late to ask more. So if something pops into your head while you're watching this morning, quietly ask your teacher, tap their shoulder or put your hand up, whatever arrangement you have, and they can send the question into us on the online chat.
Now, today we're also running a poll for those of you watching via Zoom to ask how you will be remembering this year.
Teachers, this should be going live now, and the instructions are in the chat, and we'll find out the results at the end of the show.
Every November, you'll see people wearing poppies, and each year people stop what they are doing to remember. And you might be wondering, why do we remember? What has remembrance got to do with me? Well, in this assembly, we're going to answer those questions and help you discover how we are all connected to remembrance.
We're going to give you some ideas about who you might like to think about and remember this year. We're also going to be looking at the different ways that people can remember or share their remembrance thoughts with others. And to help us do this, we have asked our fabulous historian, Izzy, to go somewhere unusual to see how we can remember. Where did you end up?
Well, it was somewhere very muddy, a bit scary, and it has something to do with the First World War.
Well, I hope you took your wellies.
I did. Can you guess where I am? I'm in a trench, but it's not a real trench. It's one at the Imperial War Museum, London. I like to come here because I like to write stories. I like to research how people fought in wars in the past. You might have been here on a school trip. I came here when I was a kid and I actually cried because it's really scary and it's horrible. Why would anybody want to be in a trench? Well, it's much better being in here than up there at ground level in no man's land. Up there, you could get caught up in barbed wire and snipers could get pot shots at you. This is why museums like the Imperial War Museum are important, not just so that we don't repeat the past mistakes, but also to remember those who served and their families. These people were doing difficult, dangerous jobs just so that we could live in a safer world. Coming up to Remembrance, you'll see people wearing these in early November. They're poppies, and they came to symbolise remembrance because after the First World War, up in the battlefields of no man's land, poppies grew. And for most people, you have to remember, poppies are red. It looked like a sea of blood, all those lives lost. But we also have to remember that poppies are a pretty delicate flower. They also mean hope. So you've got the symbol of the tragedy of the blood lost and also the hope of new life. In 1918, the war was finally stopped. It had been 4 years of fighting, and they stopped it on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And it's known as Armistice Day, because that's the day the armistice was signed. Armistice is a strange word. It comes from the Latin, so it's two Latin words, armour, meaning weapons, a bit like your arms, like weapons, and stitum, which means stop. So armistitum means weapons stop, and that's what they called the peace treaty at the end of the war, the Armistice Treaty. This year, Armistice Day is tomorrow, but Remembrance Sunday is also a special day. These are days where we can remember all of those who served to keep us safe. 1918 was ages ago. But there have been more conflicts since, like the Second World War and the Korean War, and more recently wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And right now, sadly, there are still conflicts going on around the world, like between Russia and Ukraine and in the Middle East. During this period of remembrance, we remember those who served and those who are still serving, whether they fought in the front lines or helped people in crisis, grew food for the war effort, delivered aeroplanes. All of these roles were vital and important. So remembrance doesn't need to be all about sadness. It's a time where we can come together and we can reflect, we can have gratitude, admiration, and above all, hope.
Thank you, Izzy, for reminding us that gratitude and hope are important parts of remembrance, and we'll hear more from Izzy in just a little while. Well, we heard about the link that remembrance has to poppies, and we're all wearing our brand new paper poppies this year, aren't we, Sonali?
That's right. Just like a lot of us are trying to reduce the amount of plastic that we use, the Royal British Legion has been working hard to do the same. And we've managed to get a camera in the factory where the new poppies are made. This is the first time that they've been redesigned in 28 years. So a lot of thought has gone into how to make them better. And these new paper poppies contain paper fibres left over from when coffee cups are made. So they're not only recyclable, but the paper that they're made from is partially recycled already. And the production of this new poppy will reduce carbon emissions by 40%.
And we have an expert on poppy recycling here with us in the studio. It is the marvellous artist, Cornelia Parker. Cornelia.
You flatter me.
Now, look, how have you used these in your art?
I made in 2015, I made a giant red tent for an exhibition at the Whitworth in Manchester. And I showed it last year at the Tate Britain. It's called War Room. It's made of 2 layers of punched out poppy paper.
Just like this.
Yes, which I got from the Richmond factory, the poppy factory. And because there's 2 layers, it's got a slight moire, which moires are like optical illusion, where there's 2 overlaying things that seem to be in opposition. And it makes the whole room have this kind of slightly tremorous quality.
Well, and speaking of tremorous qualities, you also persuaded the British Army to blow up a shed.
I did. I was very persuasive. This was in 1991, a long time ago. Major Dougie Hewitt blew up my shed, which was full of objects you normally find in a garden shed.
And both of those works are diptychs. Now, what does that mean?
Well, they're companion pieces. So one's about remembrance and peace, which is the white holes in the red poppy room, and obviously war is the explosion. So it's before and after in a way.
Yes, 2 things working together.
Yeah, and I made them a long time apart.
And we've been encouraging the pupils here this morning to make their own diptychs. And Sonali, what have you got over there?
I'm with Maeve, Nate and Frida, who are all working on their pieces of art. Maeve, what's the plan with your piece? Explain it to me.
Mine is a poppy, and when I paint it right now, I'm putting on the base, I'm going to have half of it red and half of it white.
I think you're doing a great job. This is beautiful. I like to see a nice 3-dimensional poppy.
Yeah, exactly. It's lovely that you've used the poppy, actually, isn't it?
It's funny, because the poppy we were wearing is the flattest poppy they've ever done, and yours is the most 3-dimensional poppy I've seen.
That's lovely. Well, I look forward to seeing the finished pieces. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maeve.
Well, looking at art such as Cornelia's War Room can be a really effective way to help us remember. And throughout history, we've asked artists to go to conflict zones to capture what they see, to show future generations, just like us, what it felt like to be there. And that type of art is called war art. And Izzy, you've been to see some of it, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I got to sneak peek behind the scenes at the Bluvatnik Gallery. It's the art, film and photography galleries at the Imperial War Museum. And I went behind the scenes with an actual war artist called Matt Cook.
Well, let's take a look, shall we?
Yes, let's. I'm here with Matt, who is a real war artist. How do you get to be a war artist?
I'm an illustrator and I work a lot for the Times newspaper. And during just before the Iraq War, they decided to send an artist out as well as photographers.
Are those your art books?
They are. These are a couple
Amazing.
of my sketchbooks.
Can I see?
So these are full of drawings I did out in Afghanistan. So these are drawings done there and then in the mud and dust.
Oh, wow.
It's a very personal approach. If you take a photograph, disappear off, whereas an artist, you spend more time there. You can compose things, so you can tell a bit of a story.
because we're standing in front of one of those exact panels that's really good for storytelling. Because look at this. This painting is enormous. Who's it by?
John Singer Sargent. It's one of the biggest paintings I've ever seen. Look at the size of it.
There are loads of little details, aren't there?
I've just noticed there's a football match going on in the background, and you can see the troops have actually thought ahead, brought their shorts and football jerseys with them.
That's incredible. Did you ever play football when you were at war?
I didn't. I'm rubbish at football, so I used to run. But I did draw some British troops playing football with some Afghans. That happened lots of times.
And did they bring their football kits?
No, they used to do it in their army-issued T-shirts and combat boots.
There are other details in the painting as well. I can see there are aeroplanes.
There's some biplanes way off in the distance, and you can see some black puffs of smoke from anti-aircraft guns.
Just look at the way that man is lifting his leg up. What's he doing?
Yes, so a lot of them have bandaged eyes, so if you imagine yourself, you put your hand in front of your eyes, you make rather exaggerated steps expecting to trip over.
So the artist has got all of this stuff going on. He's really smashed it together.
Well, he's trying to tell a bigger story. He's wanting to record what happened during the First World War, so we remember it and don't repeat it.
So that's John Singer Sargent. Let's go and see what else they've got in here.
Okay.
This is huge again, isn't it?
It's enormous.
Oh, I love it. Look, there are women in it. You hardly ever get to see women in wall paintings.
This was painted by a woman as well.
Was it?
Her name was Anna Airy. She was one of the first women war artists.
I mean, this place looks really busy. I mean, it must have been really loud in there.
Yeah, I can imagine the noise. I can even smell the coal from the furnaces. And it's something you can convey in a painting more than in a photograph. You can convey all of those senses. Apparently it was so hot that Anna's shoes actually melted to the floor when she was sketching her one time.
Wow! Oh,
Reminds me, I was in the Iraq desert. It was so hot, I was trying to preserve my drinking water that I ended up peeing in my water bottle so I could paint using the water.
You use your pee in actual paintings? Oh my goodness.
I've got a very bad habit of licking my brushes to a point as well.
Oh! You're meant to be a grown-up.
I know.
I recognise what this is because I was in a trench earlier. Have you ever been in a trench?
I have, a long time ago, yes.
Yeah, but actually, have you sketched them and stuff?
Yes, it's brought back memories. We had corrugated iron, rusted corrugated iron. This is a painting by John Nash of the First World War again.
It's weird, this, because the colours make me think of, like, deserts, you know, because we've got the mud, which is quite sandy, we've got the bright blue sky, but actually, I'm feeling really cold when I look at this. Why?
I think that clear, wintry sky makes me feel cold, and you can tell the troops are wearing their winter issue trench coats.
Trench coat
they've got
turned
the
up.
collars turned up.
So this is the third painting that we've seen of the First World War. Why are paintings so important?
It's very different from reading statistics or the number of dead in a history book. Here, the painting actually shows you. It shows you the blasted trees. I feel like I'm in the trench with those troops. I can feel the cold.
It's a really important form of remembrance. Thank you so much for meeting me, Matt, and teaching me all about these paintings.
Great fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy. And the Blavatnik Gallery at the Imperial War Museum opens this very day. Well, we're now joined by Gabriel and Ethan. And Cornelia, we were talking about the diptych, and Gabriel very much has two different sides, yes.
Actually, what I love about your piece is you're the only abstract artist in the room, I think. And actually, these gestures you're making, I presume this is the war side of things rather than the peace side of things. It looks like, I don't know if you know dazzle ships, when they painted ships with stripy camouflage so that you couldn't see them against the waves. This reminds me of that, actually. Also, it reminds me of planes in the sky. Here I am trying to find representation in abstract things.
And Gabriel, are you planning to do anything with this side or leave this side blank?
I'm going to, put this side as, peace.
And this is a preliminary drawing, I think, isn't it? So the peace looks joyous, more happy than the war.
And what colours for you represent peace?
Yellow, orange and red.
So happy colours.
Yeah.
And Ethan, if you can just lean back so we can see what you're doing. Talk us through your piece.
So basically, what I'm doing is for what the soldiers sacrificed themselves for is basically going to be nothing because of what's going on right now.
No. It's tough what's going on now,
Yeah.
right now, isn't it?
So
And what's he
that's-
holding in his hand?
A poppy.
A poppy.
Is it? Oh yeah, it's appeared. It wasn't there earlier. It's great.
And half of your page, of course, is blank. And are you planning to fill in anything around your figure?
I might do like landscapes behind him. And then fill out. I'm gonna make it nighttime in the background, so it shows like how dark it is now.
Cornelia, two very different styles here as well.
I love it. I think it's great. You know, abstraction is, you know, it's more about feeling. It's more about, a bit like music. You know, you listen to music and you're not thinking, what does this music mean? You're thinking, how does it make you feel? And that's brilliant because it makes me feel in a certain way. And this is much more, you know, graphic, and you definitely know how he's feeling. He's not feeling very happy.
It must be very difficult when you're faced with a blank sheet of paper or a blank sheet of canvas.
I know, it's the artist's dilemma. It's really tough, the blank thing, but once you start, it's fine.
Have you ever been really stuck for an idea before?
All the time.
Well, that's very encouraging.
It comes to me in the night, you know, suddenly.
Back to you, Sonali.
I might have to try and negotiate taking one of these beautiful works of art home. Now, this year, we've been out and about talking to different parts of the British Armed Forces. Major Naveed Mohammed is here with me. Tell us why it's so important for us to do that.
Well, it's really important to understand what the armed forces are about, what service is about. You know, the armed forces do a breadth of activity, and they're deployed around the world, and getting to know what they do really improves understanding.
And that's a really important point, because people talk about remembering those who have served during Remembrance Weekend especially, but actually they're not always talking about people who might have died in a conflict or a war.
Of course, the role of the armed forces, first and foremost, is to defend the country, and therefore they do get involved in war and conflict. But they also get involved in other operations to do with humanitarian aid and disaster relief and so forth, counter-poaching operations, supporting other countries to build their own capacity. So a whole breadth of activities.
Now, if you need something done, you ask a busy person. We know how busy you are, so we sent you out to be a detective to find out what service means to different people. Let's have a look at what you found.
Hello, everyone. I'm proud to be serving in the British Army. However, today I'm delighted to be at an RAF base where I'm going to speak with members of the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force and learn more about what service means to them.
Major Mohammed, welcome to Royal Air Force Cosford. I'm Squadron Leader Dave Kerrison.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for making time to see me today. I'm really interested to learn more about what service means to the Royal Air Force.
The aircraft you can see behind me have been involved with conflict, and they have been doing them sort of missions, but we also have other aircraft which help support humanitarian aid around the world, whether it's floods, earthquakes, and what we do, we provide support and help to the population to allow them to live their lives. We also provide support, not just around the world, but to people in the UK. If you think of the recent Whaley Bridge Dam, where the RAF Chinook helicopter was providing support to the dam as it was collapsing, the RAF Chinook was dropping 1-ton sandbags to help shore up the dam, and that saved a lot of people's lives. In addition, we also provide support to anybody in distress around the UK while they're walking, rock climbing, mountaineering with our mountain rescue teams.
Closer to home, the Army were also deployed during the pandemic to support the National Health Service and local authorities. Were the Royal Air Force also involved in that?
The RAF were heavily involved with support of COVID around the whole country. We had requests for manpower to provide personnel to help with vaccinations, but also to help support the vaccinations, so shepherding people into the areas and helping control that population so they could get the COVID jab.
Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. It was really wonderful to hear about what service means to you in the Royal Air Force. I'm now off to meet someone from the Royal Navy to learn about what service means to them.
Hi, Major Mohammed. I'm Petty Officer Liz Arrowsmith from the Royal Navy.
So Liz, I've just been hearing about what the Royal Air Force does in terms of its service outside of conflict, and it'd be really wonderful to hear about what the Royal Navy does in a similar situation.
We have a huge presence around the world, and one of our key areas is during hurricane season. We're down in the Caribbean islands looking after humanitarian aid. So during that time we're providing food, water supplies and helping build the infrastructure. That can be anything from buildings and schools, and also we send first aiders out on the ground to help with any medical issues. We also spend a lot of time down in Antarctica. So down there we've got HMS Protector, which is one of our survey ships. Down there she looks at anything to do with levels and temperatures of the seawater, anything to do with the population change. So we have a look at penguins. So if the penguin population is high, we know that there's good influx of fish down there and the sea's healthy. If the penguin population is starting to drop, we know that there's some trouble down there. At the moment, to help with that, we actually have penguin counters. So we send drones up into the sky and the drones take imagery and help us count the penguins. So that's a big part of what we do down in Antarctica.
And I'm aware that the Royal Navy also helps a bit closer to home as well.
The Navy also has a fishery protection squadron, so they're making sure that no illegal fishery is happening and all our endangered species are looked after.
It's been great to know what the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force do in terms of service beyond conflict. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
He's good as a detective, isn't he? Now, thank you to you all, because we are overwhelmed with the amount of questions that you sent in for Nav and Izzy to answer. Are you ready? We want to get through as many of them as we can. Nav, how do serving soldiers commemorate Remembrance Day?
Serving soldiers, when they're in the units, they could have parades, formal occasions, but many serving soldiers may be at home on leave over the weekend and will join a local community service. So there are many different ways to reflect on, including being at home. You know, remembrance is not prescriptive. There are many ways you can observe remembrance.
Do it your own way.
The next question is for Izzy. Have you ever included Remembrance Day in one of your books?
Well, yes, I have. In Billy Swift Takes Flight, that's set in 1942. And believe it or not, in the Second World War, they had Remembrance Day. So I like to make my books really historically accurate. So, of course, I included it in the story.
Nav, where has your job taken you around the world? Where have you travelled to?
I've travelled to many countries, which I don't think I'd ever have been able to travel to otherwise. I've deployed in operations to the Balkans, to Iraq, to Afghanistan. I've been to Sierra Leone. I've been to all over Europe. I've been to Brunei. So many different countries. Looking forward to visiting them again.
Wow. Okay.
This is a great question. Have you ever got emotional from looking at what has happened to people in the past?
Oh, yeah, of course you do, of course, because these people are just like us. So the soldiers who are on duty now are exactly the same sorts of people as the soldiers who were on duty 100 years ago. So it's really important to sort of put yourself in their place, you know, write a poem, write a story, and really think about them.
And I think when we see a lot of footage in black and white, it kind of puts it at distance, doesn't it? It makes it very hard for us to relate to it.
It does, and that's why it's really great to read the stories, to read their stories as well and their poetry, and actually get an understanding of what it was like.
Nav, do you have any other family members that are in the armed forces, past or present?
I have a distant family who've served in the armed forces of other countries, and here in the UK, I have a nephew who's also serving in the British Army.
Izzy, what period of history are you currently studying?
Well, I'm looking actually at the American Revolutionary War, but I'm telling it from the British perspective. But that's a whole new project for me.
Nav, how do you feel when you're serving? Was this something you always wanted to do? Are you doing your dream job?
I'm not too sure about my dream job, but certainly it's something which fills me with a lot of excitement. I arrived in the UK as a 13-year-old, joined the Army Cadet Force, and was bitten by the bug. And, you know, 36 years later, as a mixture of a reservist and some full-time service, here I am.
Nav, Izzy, thank you so much. And thank you to you all for sending in your questions. Zeb, how are our artists getting on?
Well, they're doing really, really well. I'm with Kami, Giacomo and Renee. And this helmet here is fantastic. Tell us what you've written on it.
So I've written war is forever because war will never stop, even like in just small arguments and just big conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, the forever is quite poignant, isn't it? The idea. I remember seeing a list of presidents of the United States, and there was a war beside each one because there was always a war going on, and it's that eternity is really daunting, I think.
And what colours are you planning on using?
I'm going to use like greens and reds to like represent like the reds for like the poppies and the fire, like in the wars. And that.
So one side of the helmet is happy, and not happy, but just, you know, about remembrance and peace, and the other side is not. It's about the constant threat of war worldwide.
And let's turn around to this easel here, and Giacomo.
Wow.
We were talking about the diptych and the two halves to the picture. Tell us about the two halves to your picture.
So on the right, there is a World War I soldier, and on the left, it's a man, like a relative, who's remembering him.
He looks like he's the same person. He could be a twin.
Yeah.
And with your soldier on the right, obviously that's in black and white, and then you're using colour on the left here. How are you going to develop that left-hand side?
Well, I'm trying to make like the left side like more happy, like with bright colours.
And more contemporary. He's
Yeah.
a contemporary man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, we have Renee around the other side here, who's working at a completely different medium. Renee, tell us how you've made this piece.
So I used clay, and it's kind of the soldier on one side.
Can I touch it?
Yeah. And then
That's great.
the other side is the person when they were a child.
Oh, an earlier version of them.
So it's quite similar to what Giacomo's doing, but in 3 dimensions.
Yeah. But I like the idea that it's the same person at an earlier stage in their life.
Yes.
Before conflict.
Cornelia, why are diptychs helpful, do you think, with remembrance?
Because a war is so awful that the idea of the opposite is, you know, a very hopeful thing. You know, that once you've had war in your country and then you have peace, you appreciate peace so much more because you know what it means to not have it.
Yes.
Like the Blitz in London in the Second World War, there was a war spirit that people felt like united, you know, all having the same terror. And then when the war finished, you know, there was a baby boom.
Yes. Sonali, back to you.
So much talent here in the studio, and hopefully that's given you, those watching at school, some inspiration for your art class. And it's great that so many of you are joining us from schools across the country. 2 schools travelled to London. They're not here, though. They're watching from inside one of the most famous houses in the capital, number 10 Downing Street. Every Friday, the Prime Minister's wife, Akshata Murthy, hosts kids as part of her lessons at 10. Let's see what they're up to today.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. How wonderful to be part of the Remembrance Live Assembly this morning. And I'm so excited to welcome 2 schools, as Sonali said. We have Salway Ash Primary School and Martham Academy and Nursery School, and they're both here with me in Downing Street as a part of the Lessons at 10 initiative. So shall we all say hello to the camera? There we go. Now, Lessons at 10 is about bringing boys and girls like you from across the country to come and visit us here in Downing Street and to meet some incredibly inspiring guests. And today we have a few of those here. But today's special session is all about remembrance and honouring the men and women who have served in our armed forces, and on reflecting what remembrance means to all of us. As a family, we've tried to play a small part in volunteering for the Poppy Appeal collectors and to raise money for the Royal British Legion. And we're all wearing our recyclable poppies with pride. I think all of us here certainly have a poppy. And this year, both the Prime Minister and myself will be on Remembrance Sunday visiting the cenotaph, and that's a real honour. The cenotaph was built just over 100 years ago. It was made from strong Portland stone, and it stands proudly as a symbol of gratitude to those who are currently serving, veterans, and all those who have lost their lives in all the conflicts since the First World War. And we watched a bit about that just now. Today, the children here in the Lessons at 10 initiative are also lucky enough to meet a minister who's also a veteran. And here we have Johnny, who is the Minister for Veterans. So can we all say hello to Johnny and welcome him to Lessons at 10, but also to this assembly?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us during this important month when we reflect and remember all those who have so loyally served the nation. Now, there are lots of remembrance events going on this weekend. You have the National Service of Remembrance tomorrow at the Cenotaph on Sunday, which you can watch on television. Every year, members of the royal family, the armed forces, and politicians lay a wreath during the service of remembrance. And today, we're also welcoming the Royal British Legion's Director of Remembrance, Philippa, who helps organise a huge march of 10,000 veterans past the Cenotaph after the service. Hello, Philippa. I know you have some really good ideas on where the children could go to remember this weekend.
I do, Johnny. Hello, everybody. There are over 100,000 war memorials right across the UK, from the Cenotaph just along the road from us here to the Armed Forces Memorial, the huge Armed Forces Memorial at the National Memorial Arboretum, and lots of town and village memorials right across the country. So there's probably one quite close to where you live. Do you know where your local war memorial is? If not, this weekend is a really good time to find out and pay it a visit.
So we really hope you find time in this special weekend to acknowledge those who have served, those who have died in service, and those who keep us safe today. So from all of us here, from Downing Street, from Lessons at 10, goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you so much to Mrs. Murthy and the children for that live drop-in to our assembly this morning. And great to see even the Prime Minister's house, number 10 Downing Street, being turned into a classroom today. Well, we have another surprise here in the studio too. These wonderful people are members of the London Youth Choirs, and they very kindly said that they will perform a piece of remembrance music for us.
Well, I love choirs, so I'm delighted that we've managed to squeeze one into the studio. Rachel, you are their conductor. What are they going to be singing for us?
Well, today we're going to be singing a song by the composer Sir Charles Hubert Parry, quite a name, and the song is called My Soul There Is a Country.
Now, he was a teacher, wasn't he? And many of his pupils, I think, were lost in the war.
He was a teacher, and he was composing this set of 6 songs towards the end of his compositional life. And it was a really turbulent time because the war was on, and as you say, many of his students went to serve in the war and consequently died.
And what do you think he wants us to feel when we hear his music?
Well, I think for the listener, there's a sense of kind of the struggle of war and the sadness and the grief and the turbulence of that time. But you can hear at the end of the song, it kind of comes to a rousing finish. And as he was writing this piece towards the end of the war, you know, a consequence was coming and resolution was happening. So I think you can hear the hope and the joy of a new life to come.
So it completely chimes with the artwork that's being done today with the two sides, you know, also, you know, thinking about the conflict, but also thinking about hope and positivity and remembrance. Well, let's hear it.
Absolutely.
Stars, where stands our
And there's that tremendously hopeful ending that Rachel told us about.
So moving, so moving.
The London Youth Choir Chamber Choir. Well, it sounds obvious, but a hugely important part of songs is the words that are sung. And perhaps you didn't know that they're often not written by the composer of the piece of music. Well, the words we've just heard were actually written by the Welsh poet Henry Vaughan. Now, some of you have been finding out about war poetry, which was made famous in the First World War by poets such as John McCrae and Wilfred Owen. One of John McCrae's famous poems is called In Flanders Fields. He was a Canadian surgeon on the battlefields in Flanders, and that poem talks about all the soldiers who died before the poppies grew there, just as Izzy described a little earlier.
Wilfred Owen was a soldier in the British Armed Forces serving in the trenches in France. He was caught in an explosion which he amazingly survived, but he sadly got something called shell shock. It's now called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and it can affect people's body and mind. And organisations like the Royal British Legion help those in the armed forces and their families recover from PTSD with some of the money raised by the donations that they receive when you buy poppies.
After recovering in England for a little while, Wilfred Owen went back to France to fight again and was sadly killed just days before the end of the First World War, on the 4th of November. His poems explain to readers just how unpleasant war can be, which is important, as sometimes people who serve can find it difficult to share their experiences.
And lots of you have been writing poetry about the theme of remembrance too. The British and Commonwealth Armed Forces have taken part in lots of conflicts over the years. But this year marks 70 years since the fighting came to an end in the Korean War. Veteran Alan Guy joined the army because he was left school and he didn't want to go working down the mines.
And we're very honoured that Alan, who served in the Royal Army Medical Corps, has written a poem which he would like to share with us this morning.
Long forgotten by their country, men who fought on distant land, some who died in mortal combat, slaughtered by a foreign hand, young men wounded, young men crying, young men bleeding, and young men dying. Was their sacrifice in vain? Were their efforts worth the pain? Happy children, so beguiling, laughing, jumping, skipping, smiling, now fill the land of morning calm. All are safe and free from harm, and thanks to every mother's son who fought for each and every one, and showing that, despite that pain, their valiant efforts were not in vain.
Thank you, Alan. And now please stand for our 2-minute silence.